Hey, Matt. View them. Come on. Show me. There we go. Can you guys hear me okay?
Meeting number 2, commence.
Meeting number 2. That's right. We got a smaller group today, it looks like.
It's always like that. The first day of school, there's always the entire class. And then as the semester goes on, there's going to be less of them. It's always been like that.
That doesn't preclude the question why. Why do people decide not to come to class?
I cannot answer that question really, but then again, they might be just a little tardy. So
yeah, we'll give them a minute or two. In fact, I'm kind of surprised I was spot on time today. I just left a pretty painful meeting.
Did you have a meeting last time?
So far I've had meetings before all of my Wednesday classes. Yeah, or my Thursday classes, I'm sorry. Yeah. I might pitch some questions to you guys at the end of this, sort of freelance a little bit of public opinion here and find out what your feedback might have been in the same meeting I just had to sit through. All right, what do we got? We got 3 minutes after. I'm going to kind of gently ease into this, and whoever comes. And, if they want to sit this one out, oh, well. Okay, so we're looking at, let me share my screen here. That'll be helpful. Okay. That's better. All right, so here we are. Let me get to my modules page.
Okay. I don't think you have enough tabs up.
You don't think so?
You think you got room for more?
There's always room for more tabs. Don't be ridiculous. All right, so start here. So this is going to be our first real conversation for the semester. It's another general broad topic, but I think it's really important. Unfortunately, you're having this discussion in your capstone class. I kind of feel like there ought to be, kind of like in some of your classes, you have entrance surveys and exit surveys, I think it should be the same way in the film program. I think that we need to get a really good consensus of who you are, what your goals are, where you want to go in the beginning of this experience, so that by the end, when you take something like capstone, you have some good contrasting ideas, maybe about how you approached a survey as a freshman and what you think of your career choice at this point, your direction at this point, your learning experience at this point. Because I think that those questions, the answers to those questions can be very telling. But here we are, module 1, week 2, and we're going to talk about some stuff relevant to your career choices and the direction you're heading in. So we start off by taking a look at an IndieWire article, and you guys are responding to that. I got to get rid of this thing somehow. I'm just going to go sort of blind. You guys can follow along. And the IndieWire article is talking about some things that you have to know to make it in the film industry. So I guess it's better late than never to have this conversation, but it seems a little 11th hour to me. Maybe it's just an affirmation about what you should be thinking about at this point. But so I want to put it out there to the audience and ask you guys to sort of help me with this discussion and tell me, give me your sense of this article, such as you understood it, or the tone that you detected as you were reading through it. Anybody can start.
So I think it really touched base on just more like the reality of the situation, because I guess most people go off and they think that immediately you're going to be placed in the job that you want, or the exact department you want within a production, whether that be film, television, or commercial or anything. But it seems to me that a lot of it is just getting your foot in the door once you start. Like once you start, it's just literally getting that first foot inside that door, just so you can just meet your connections.
Well, it could be. And it occurred to me when I was looking at this and at the video that you folks had to watch, that you guys have to have asked yourself a really important question, which is what kind of filmmaker and what kind of career are you expecting to have? And I think that that's a fair question. Okay. So maybe you're not sure if you want to be a director or a screenwriter, or maybe you want to be a documentary filmmaker. Maybe you want to make your own films as an independent individual or small group of individuals, or maybe you want to work on big budget stuff, which is very much manufacturing and team sports. I think you have to have a good sense of what that direction is as soon as absolutely possible, so you can start tailoring your learning experience accordingly. And if you can't answer that question shortly after getting into film school, it should be the first question you want to address. This is talking about reputation, and it's all that you have, and it's talking about the relationships that you form. You could think about those things in terms of, starting here in film school, your reputation as a filmmaker in film school. What kind of reputation do you have? Are you the person who's in the film program and you're kind of fun to hang out with, and you're at all the popular parties on Friday night? Or are you the nerdy one that always seems to be in the editing lab, and you're always working on something, and you're rarely seen except late at night shuffling in and out of the Nicholson building because you've been working on a computer all night, cutting or coloring or something, or somewhere in between. Okay. It's talking about choosing your friends carefully, and choosing people that are, can help you advance your career versus those who are simply, um, sort of reinforcing what you want to hear, or giving you the kind of advice that seems to sound like everything that you do is amazing. And, is that valuable feedback for you as a creator, right? Um, know that you're dealing with gamblers. Well, I don't know. Some of this stuff I agree with, and some of it I really don't. So I'm really kind of curious what your take was on this and the video, because I want to really kind of talk about both of them. What do you think? Who can help me out with this question? This is a conversation.
Um, if I may, um, well, with the article, the best piece of advice that I was pulling from it, and the main thing I was getting from it, is like, at this point, hopefully others have received that knowledge, with the knowledge that the industry is tough to get into, right? It's a difficult thing to break into, and acquiring the job you want, or going for jobs in general, is difficult. But the information that was here, that was really concrete, that I hadn't heard so concrete before, kind of like the notion was floated, is these cautionary tales. They're talking about how you behave on a set, how you act at all times, right? I've worked in plenty of jobs where the culture, like food service, right, or any or retail, right, the culture in these jobs is to complain about your job, because it's fun to sympathize with other people in your job about how awful your working conditions can be sometimes, right? Like, oh my goodness, I just had this awful table, and they didn't tip me at all, right? That's how those jobs go. But then this is so completely opposite, and being like, you like complain to like, like your significant other in your free time in the comfort of your own home. But on set or anywhere near set or in relation to these people, you are a professional. You are not, you are, don't say something is bad, right? You get coffee all day, you get coffee all day, right? Like that was one of the exact scenarios, is that you don't complain about these things, don't joke about complaining about these things, right? Because everyone loves being in movies or whatever, right? Loves working on them. So there's like a don't badmouth it kind of feel.
Anybody else have a take on that? That sounds like cautionary tale number one, as you're on the bottom rung.
Yeah, sounds similar to that.
That's true in many circumstances, but again, I have to ask you, what qualifies that in your mind? I mean, for instance, the meeting that I left, I'm sitting in a meeting with a bunch of faculty and administrators, and they're all trying to figure out, how can we make the program better, and the reality is the program is just trying to serve two different masters. Is trying to serve auteur theorists who are probably going to end up as academics and educators, making experimental films and deliberating over the validity of dead Russian filmmakers. And then there are the other people in the program who are trying to learn how to be a part of an industry that reflects aspects of society, but offers you a job that is, and albeit akin to manufacturing in a lot of ways. But I still would rather work in a movie factory than a car factory. I'd rather sweep a stage floor than a supermarket floor. And I think I'd rather throw sandbags around on set than bag groceries, but they can both feel like a day job sometimes. Don't get me wrong, they can both feel like a day job. So it's not that you're not supposed to criticize the industry. Healthy, productive criticism, I think, is a good thing. But some days it sucks. I'm gonna be honest with you. I spent a lot of my career on lighting crews, and when you're on location, for instance, and you're shooting day exterior and it starts to rain. Usually the ADs have a plan. There's a set close by or whatever. They're going to shoot some interiors. And so everybody goes, oh, thank heavens. The ADs are taking care of us. It's raining and it's going to be miserable weather. And we're all going to move inside where we can stay warm and dry and make our film. And the lighting guys go, yeah, F you, because guess what the DP wants to do? He wants to light through the windows. That means our job's still outside in the rain and the electricity. How you like me now, And so it's not always for everybody a paradise, and I think it's okay sometimes to be a little disgruntled with that, as long as you always maintain your perspective, which is, hey, I could be selling cars and I'm not, I'm shooting cars instead, or I'm rigging cars with cameras or whatever it is you're doing. So I think balance is really, really important with a lot of this advice. But understanding that you're at the bottom of the rung, I think, applies to people who are getting into the industry as some kind of service provider. You're going to work on a crew or in a department where you're going to offer certain services that are in aggregate the whole effort of making a movie. And you're not going to be the sole creator of a small independent film, because I think those are kind of two different worlds. So I think we have to identify what world we belong to. I came from the world of major studio production, which is, like I said, a lot like manufacturing. Lots of people involved and everybody has a job to do. There's nobody that's handling or managing all of the aspects of what's going on. There's lighting people in the lighting department, grips in the grip department, camera people in the camera department. Everybody's got a job and a focus, and it's the contribution of all of those groups that work towards making that movie, and you're doing it together. So is that one kind of filmmaker, and then the other kind of filmmaker is the one that's down in the basement at mom and dad's house because you've blown all your money on your low budget film and you can't afford to rent your own apartment, and you're working on this thing and you're passionate about it, and you're cutting and you're shooting and maybe you're acting in it as well. what kind of filmmaker are you? You really need to understand that. I think you can be both, and I think there's a time and place for each one of those. And I'm really interested in hearing, who you guys think you're going to be. Who are you now? Who do you want to be when you get out of here? And that might help you with some of these, some of these pieces of advice, because, you're on the bottom rung if you're working on a Sony motion picture. Yeah. But if it's your motion picture and you're funding the whole thing and you've spent every last dollar and borrowed credit cards to make it, you're on the bottom and the top at the same time. And I experienced a little bit of that when I made my first documentary. I went from, working on large studio pictures to funding this thing on my own, and I ended up being as concerned with how we were going to get rid of the trash at the end of the day as I was with shooting the images and making sure we got all of the scenes that we needed to get shot, and the audio was good and the trucks were fueled up, and so on and so forth. So consider who you are as a filmmaker and where you want to go with this, and then take some of this advice with a grain of salt, I think. But there are some things that are kind of handy to, to consider, like, just because it's in your head doesn't mean it has to come out of your mouth. I thought that was kind of, it's a funny way of saying, keep some of your, your non-productive comments to yourself, or there's a right place and a right time to pose a question or level of criticism, right? Especially if it's going to sting a little bit. And maybe the worst time to do that is right in the middle of an intense scene, and everybody is trying to elicit a heady performance out of an actor, and you want to talk about how crappy the lunch was. There's a time and place, for all of that, and just because you point out that the lunch sucked doesn't mean that it's not a valid point. Just might not be the right place and time to bring it up.
Right, because
yeah,
because it's a compromise, but it would be worth it keeping your mouth shut, our mouth shut, because gotta remember, we're all there for the same 3 reasons. 1, make money. 2, make art. 3, achieve the ranks. And as long as we keep leveled heads, we'll be greatly rewarded.
And not necessarily in that order. But certainly, it's interesting that you put make money at the top of that list, and then rank at the bottom of the list, and in between making art, right? So I think a practical way of thinking at this point is put art out of your head if you're going to join the collaborative manufacturing style filmmaking that is studio films and notable theatrical films, the kind of stuff you go to the movie theaters to watch, because a lot of times art is the last thing that the studios are worried about. What they're worried about is following the blueprint that they established in pre-production, or that they may have established on previous films that have done well at the box office. And sometimes there's not a whole lot of art taking place, and it's really more making sure that you get the safe, calculated material that they know that they can package and exploit the way they need to in order to turn a profit. A lot of times art happens by accident.
Oh, well, yeah, I was just about to say that, because maybe the most profitable thing is the art. It depends on. Yeah.
We like to think so. Wouldn't that be great in a perfect world if the art was the bottom line, if that was the principal objective here? And so that might be the very impetus for you, choosing the life of a small independent filmmaker versus a studio contributor, because you get more creative control at the level of an independent filmmaker, especially if you're paying the tab. So I think before you start, adopting all of this advice, you want to decide who you are as a filmmaker. Okay, so yeah, he's talking about politics and stuff. Politics in studio films is pretty bad, and it's usually a result of the adverse attraction to money or status that is associated with studio films. Whenever there's a lot of money being thrown around, there's a lot of people who are competing for those resources, and they sort of those politics get in the way of the creative process, and can be a major stumbling block or a hurdle that you have to negotiate, even if you're simply trying to be a part of the thing, in the simplest or meagerest capacity. The politics for, just being on set as a member of the crew in any capacity is often the result of a bitter competition between somebody. Being there means something to them for some reason, and so they're willing to go to great lengths to accomplish their goal. That's the reality of the industry. So, um, any other aspects of the article that that stood out to you in any way? I think it's all kind of fairly common sense. I'm seeing a lot of head nodding, but okay. What about the video? What about the Movie Maker video that we're also looking at here? This one was a little more explicit, I think. But again, I think it's really, really important to figure out what kind of filmmaker you are, because, this guy's talking about, having a bad day on set and then having to go to the studios and cut all night. It's like, well, I don't know that guy. Not in the studio system, in the studio, well, other than maybe the director who ends up going to edit usually at the end of the day. But if you work on a camera crew or a lighting crew or a grip crew or a prop crew or construction or whatever, when the shoot day is over, you go home. You don't go and edit. So his advice, I think, was sort of narrow and appealing to a small group of people that are maybe closer to the top of the food chain necessarily than they are in the entry level positions. But what do you think? Was there anything in here that that stood out to you in particular based on your experience so far? Anyone can jump in here.
Where's the Movie Maker article? I think I saved it in the
If you follow the link, which is in the modules page, there's a page that will lead you to it. Let me see if I can find that for you. So we are here. So there's the IndieWire article link is here, and the link to the Movie Maker is here. This page will open and it'll give you another link that you got to follow, and that'll take you to YouTube.
Okay, I see it now.
Okay, so this is the article itself, and then I have I had the video queued up. I've messed up somehow here. I'll find it. I got it in here. Writer of high resolution was like a dream. Remember the easier time. Well, okay. What did you do right out of film school? What advice do you wish someone would given you when you were a film student? That's a good question to ask you guys. What advice did you think you wanted or did you not receive? You're all seniors now, right?
Yeah.
So we heard last week someone was saying that they didn't learn and they didn't feel like they learned enough about the process. So that's one good constructive piece of advice. Were your expectations met with your experience through the program? Was there something that you felt might have been left out? Areas that you thought you might cover that you didn't get to cover, or things you didn't get to try?
The hardest part of getting into the film program is beginning how to get started. That's basically really the toughest thing I believe might be it, because you're trying to get your foot in the door. You pretty like, even though you're learning this stuff at school, seeing the field isn't exactly the same as what you learn in school. And I don't think school could ever prepare you for what you might run into in some regards.
I mean, that's that's absolutely true. I mean, we can give you a taste of a lot of things. The question is, what are the things that are the most important? Okay. So I teach now for three distinct reasons. The first is, you know, after Angels and Demons, my body was so badly broken that I had surgeries and I went through rehab. And, you know, there was no going back to the world that I was a part of with that kind of physical activity when you've been broken that badly. So there was a need there for change. And then there was the consideration of my oath to the union, which was, you know, when you become a member of the IATSE, the International Alliance of Theatrical and Studio Employees, particularly 728, which is the set lighting local. Okay, it's right in your oath that you take when you go to your membership meeting, which is that you're going to honor the tenets of the union and the union bylaws. Um, you're going to be an upstanding professional. You're going to maintain um, a good relationship with the union. You're going to, in other words, you're going to be in good standing. You're going to pay your dues. You're going to go to meetings. You're going to participate. And the other requirements of your oath is that you're going to be a good mentor, because even though you might just be starting out and taking the oath early on in your career, the expectation is that your career is going to flourish and that you're going to become good at what you do, good enough to be able to um, give advice to, you know, up and coming generations, and show them the ropes, in essence, right? And so that's another aspect of, you know, teaching. And then the third aspect of teaching was a personal point of view for me, and that was, you know, I went to film school before I got out into the industry, into the film industry anyway. Um, and I didn't particularly feel that my experience in film school was helpful. And I hadn't even worked on movies yet. I had only been a still photographer working, you know, commercially for a studio. But even that experience was informing my attitude towards film school very early on in the process. And I knew that there was going to be a lot more that I was going to be learning, and a lot more things I was going to see outside of, you know, the environment of academia. And I dropped out. Um, so my whole push now, one of the biggest things that concerns me as a teacher now in film school, is give you folks the kind of stuff that I wanted and never got. It's still a bug in my craw, you know. Why didn't I learn enough about certain things when I was a student, especially when I was paying for an education? Why didn't I get a better taste of what was going to slam me in the nose when I got out there, you know? And so that's always been a big concern of mine. And so I love to use the phrase, you know, too much theory about dead Russian filmmakers, but it's kind of how I feel. You know, it's really great to understand the significance of Andrei Tarkovsky, for instance, to camera movement in auteur cinema. All right. But nobody gives a hoot about that on the set of your favorite TV show. They want you to know about dollies and camera support and how to move that camera and follow the action, right? But you don't have to know one iota about Andrei Tarkovsky to excel in that environment. What you need to be taught is the dolly and how the dolly works and how you mount the camera to it and what happens when the dolly moves and how do you maintain a good frame when the dynamics of the camera are sliding out beneath your feet and you got to take a ride on a 700-pound piece of equipment pushed by a couple of fat grips from LA, right? That's what you need to know. That's what I want to teach you and show you guys. So that's the kind of thing that won't surprise you when you get out. And then a little peppering, I think, of the theory in school is nice to give you a break from the physical exertion of the technical classes, and to give you a little something to talk about at the water cooler when you get out into the real world. But nobody's expecting you to be an expert on, you know, Russian film theory and montage and, you know, and all of those things that, you know, we seem to hover on so heavily in academia. And what we need to give you is a means to a paycheck, because that's what you're going to desperately need when you get out of school. Otherwise, you're going to end up at the mall selling shoes or, whatever. And I can tell you this, once you start getting addicted to the paycheck, there's no going back to any other plan or any other dream of anything else without a great deal of discomfort and risk on your part. Because establishing a trend of paychecks so that you can do things like buy a car and have a house and maybe get married and things of that nature, you got to have a job to do that. Okay, and you can't be sleeping on couches your whole life. Not if you expect to meet certain goals along the way, certain life goals that you might have for yourself. So every point of view, I think, is going to be have a certain amount of very personal motivation behind it. So I think it's good if there is any time, if you have had any experience or haven't had any experience in certain areas that you wish you had, there may yet be a little time for you to rectify that before you graduate and get out of here. Identify it as quickly as possible if it's really important to you, and get to somebody that can help you. Ask your instructors, ask your guidance counselors and stuff how to resolve those unresolved issues before you graduate. Or I don't know what the hurry is for everybody to graduate and get out of here, other than if at this point you're young and it seems like all you've ever been is in school your whole life, then you might just want to get the heck out of school just to have experience what the other half lives like. But there's a lot to be said for academia, at least early on. It's a good place for you to make your mistakes, and this is one of the key points from some of the reading, is make your mistakes in film school and learn as much as you want or as much as you feel you need to feel confident to get out there and try stuff and not get scared away from the process, because it's a big, daunting, clumsy, shambling machine when you encounter it in the wild. It can be a little intimidating, I think, at times, depending on what market you're working in. As seniors, then, what advice would you give film students coming into the program now?
Learn how to be on a film set, or
Well, that's
because
kind of
for I'm sorry, I keep interrupting.
No, I stepped on you. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that before I transferred to UCF, I was in Miami-Dade College, and I did basically a little bit of everything. I've set up lights, cameras. I've been the camera guy. I've been the boom mic guy. Just basically a little bit of everything. And I feel that I wish I had a bit more of that while I was here at UCF. I mean, I did kind of go over the same classes because for some reason not all of my credits transferred over, so I did have to repeat a few classes. But I would have preferred more hands-on experience, more than anything else, really.
That's interesting. I heard that about Miami-Dade College from another student. I have someone coming in as a junior. She's in my writing for film and TV class right now. Her name is Mayara. She's from Brazil. She also went to Miami-Dade. Sounds like maybe around the same time you did. It'd be interesting to find out if you two know one another, and if not, maybe we should introduce you guys as fellow alumni of Miami-Dade and see what your commonalities are. What else?
Cool.
Yeah, I think it's pretty neat that you both ended up here. I think it's kind of interesting, coincidental. Who else? Anybody else got some advice?
Trust your instincts, because these teachers are not always going to be correct. Sometimes what you learn from these teachers are just suggestions. What you get out of it, what you want to do and everything, that's completely up to you. these professors are not here to hold your hands. They're just here to talk. They're just talking to you about their experiences and what they know to you. But their experiences are not going to be the same as yours. You might have your own point of views and everything. So just all you got to, so really trust yourself as best you could.
Well,
use your instincts.
you certainly, you certainly need to develop a sense of confidence in your own judgment, at least fundamentally, so that when you get outside, because you won't have anybody to rely on when you get outside and you leave school. I have something I want to read to you guys that addresses that issue in particular, something that I wrote a year or so ago. But yeah, your teacher, well, first of all, your teacher should be imparting to you valuable and actionable information. If they're not, you should question that relationship right away. They have to be right in their assessment of the industry and in the advice that they give you. Otherwise, it's not really advice; it's just merely opinion. And they should be able to furnish you with some actionable advice as well. You know, I think that's all very helpful. But the idea that each person is sort of experiencing their own path through film school and into the industry is true to a very, very large degree. However, there is a fair amount of predictable standardization when you're talking about, for instance, the studio lifestyle, which is, when you learn skills to do a certain kind of a job from a certain discipline involved in filmmaking, like audio, location, audio, sound, or grip support, or lighting, or camera work. You're going to learn some fairly standard ways of doing things that are going to be, replicated out in the industry when you get out of school. And so you should have the best possible practices and information relevant to those topics. But should you be a camera person or a lighting person or a script supervisor? Yeah, that's going to depend wholly on what your strengths are as a student and as a filmmaker, and what your career goals might be. So yeah, there's going to be a certain amount of deviation, and then there's a certain amount of things that you can rely on depending on what approach you're taking. If you're going to be an independent filmmaker, it's going to feel a lot like hunting around in the dark for a flashlight. If you haven't been a part of the process in any other way except in film school, because I think film school is it's not a real accurate model in terms of how you're going to approach filmmaking when you get out of here. For instance, if you're not from Orlando, and when you graduate from school you're going to go back to your hometown in, say, Cleveland, are you going to know 50 people like you do now in the film program that you might be able to solicit their help to get your capstone film done? Probably not. So you're going to have to learn how to build that community in the place that you go after film school. Learn how to open those communication lines of communication and learn how to network and so forth. So again, I keep hearkening back to my point, which is, what kind of filmmaker do you want to be when you get out of here? And serve that goal with your experience in film school to make sure that, when you get out of here, you can maintain some continuity and your expectations won't be totally out of whack with what you're able to accomplish when you get out of here. One of the big things that I found valid, I think it was the other article, was talking about the value of networking and building up networks of friends and relationships that carry forward after film school. That can be really, really important, and I firmly agree with that kind of advice, because I think that people succeed in groups much more efficiently than they do individually. Which is at the root of trade unionism as well as independent filmmaking. You can argue as one person or you can argue as a group, and the larger the group, the more power you have. And if you're all looking for work and you're all part of the same group and you play to each other's strengths, some of you are writers, some of you are camera people, some of you are producers, some of you are really good with sound or with music composition, and you can all pool your resources by networking together. package yourself as a group and create a common project, that can be an excellent way to succeed in the independent world of filmmaking. Or you dedicate yourself to the notion of getting out there with a specific set of skills, lighting skills, camera skills, audio skills. Get yourself as an apprentice or as an entry-level member of one of the labor unions, audio union, lighting union, camera union. Let them help you find jobs and then start your work early on in your career as an apprentice, and just learn the craft on the fly out in the world, doing the thing, all of which can be accomplished without having gone to film school. So that raises a very important question. Why did you come? Right? Did you come merely for the skill building exercises, or did you come for the community? Did you come to be exposed to ideas you've never heard before? Did you come to discuss and to share ideas, network, find friends, make friends? What's going on with you, and where are you in that process? Do you feel successful at this point? I'll put that question out to the group.
Well, I know there's some stuff I need to work on, and then there's some stuff that I feel I'm good at. Like, for example, I feel like I'm the best working alone because I'm not the best people person in the world. I'm not weak as a people person, just not that strong. I'd say intermediate. So I know my flaws, but I know my strengths as well.
What kind of filmmaker do you see yourself as? Are you like a documentary filmmaker? Or are you
No, I guess I didn't understand the question. I definitely know that I want to do narrative, and I know what kind of approach I want to do with them.
like independent?
Okay, well, maybe not independent or group, but in a perspective of how I want to make the movies, like in a narrative sense, then yes, I definitely know what to do. The story, how to make the story. Question is, would it be better joining the studios or being independent? Because like you said, being independent, you got more creative control. But going into the studios, you might have less creative control, but more resources. So
Yeah.
That's basically it. Maybe you want to start off in the studios, and when you want to make the best project, the best one, you're the one that you've been dreaming of, something that you've prophesized yourself destined to make, that's your independent one.
I think you've hit on a really solid point, which is I agree with that, and I've demonstrated that in my own life. If you, for instance, if you're just a lighting technician, right? You really like working on film sets, doing film lighting. You can do that, and that can be your day job. And while you're doing that, offering that skill for a paycheck, you're also in the presence of other filmmakers who might be a little further along in understanding how to package their idea and gather the resources and, retain the commitment of banks and financiers to get a movie made, because that's a whole process that you have to learn, and you have to sort of see it happening organically in nature so you can emulate it, or you can ask questions from those who are successful at doing it. It's easy to theorize how to budget a film, right? Oh, it's easy. First you get $1 million, then you do a budget. Well, yeah, but that first step's a pretty big one. First get $1 million. How do you do that? There's ways to do that. Well, until you know what those ways are, I think the best way to solve the problem is to have a skill you can trade for a paycheck. And then once you're on the inside, you can watch and you can move around and you can learn from people and you can create new networks of friends and so forth that can help you grow into these other areas that interest you. And after, a few years of learning the ropes and seeing exactly how the sausage is made in a professional environment, and knowing how to get it done, that might be the best time for you, and save a little money in the process. That might be the best time for you to try your hand at making your own film. That's what I did. I made 2 documentaries. I financed them myself. My first one cost me like 65 grand. right? And I financed it, out of pocket. And I did it after I'd been in the industry for what was 2009, like 24 years, something like that. And I felt, and in a lot of ways, I still feel this way. I learned more in that documentary experience than I had learned in 20 some years on sets making other people's movies. And that's fine. That's okay, because, one thing begat the other, and I got the best taste of both worlds. So in that respect, I think you might be right. Why do you have to do one or the other? Why can't you do both? Just figure out which order works best for you. Some people think that they need to make their own film first, and they want to do a certain amount of exploration into that process and feel you want to feel the freedom to make creative decisions before all those freedoms are kind of taken away from you when you join the studio environment, right? And maybe that's a good way to go, because then if you have a film that you've made, you can use it as a calling card. That might work for you, especially if you want to kind of get around certain entry-level jobs and sort of enter the game at a little bit higher level in the studio environment, in that ecosystem. Maybe. Or if you're just not quite sure, like for instance, if you're about to graduate and you still really don't know what your role is going to be in the film industry getting out of school, then my best advice for you is pick one of those technical skills that you felt the most akin with when you were taking classes, and explore that avenue and get into that union organization as quickly as possible, and let those safety nets and those communities help you advance your career. A lot of the unions, the trade disciplines represented by the locals, work as hiring halls. And so as soon as you're qualified to work in that discipline, they'll recommend you to producers and production companies to do that work. So there's a lot to be said for finding your way into the trade union community as soon as possible when you get out of school, so that you have more people working in favor of your best interest by helping with larger communities that are organized and helping individuals get assimilated into the industry in that particular craft. Sound engineers, lighting, grip, camera, and start as an entry level, person, technician in one of those job categories, and then sample life on the inside. Take a look around when you're on set and you have a moment to, take a break. Just take a look around and see what other people are doing, and figure out if maybe you might want to try that yourself at some point, and then make those inroads, meet those people, connect, network. I did it. Go ahead.
I hear the UCF graduate program really helps guide you to making your own film.
Well, that'll be mandatory. If you're going to get an MFA in filmmaking, you have to produce a film by the end of your tenure in school. So,
wait 10 years?
No, tenure at the end of your term as an MFA student, which will on average about 3.5 years. Okay, so at the end of that term, you will have had to make a film. You have to make a film as a BFA as well.
But I think the BFA has like short films, while the MFA's got a production, like put in theaters and stuff.
Well, I don't know. Well, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't know if it's mandatory that you make a full-length feature. But the expectation is quite a bit higher with the MFA than it is from the BFA.
Well, that's what I'd want to do. I want to make a feature film. I just want to make absolutely certain that I know what I'm doing to make it,
Sure, absolutely. Why not? So
that's pretty much it. That's like the only reason why I want to do the graduate program, is to make that first film, and then have them to guide me in the process if there's anything I'm missing. But then again, there could be something better out there. That I haven't decided yet, and that's a toughie.
Better than making movies for a living? No, there might be. Yeah.
No. I don't mean it's going to make I'm going to make the movies regardless. It's just that who would be the better guides? Would I stay at the graduate program, or should I get some sort of mentorship at a studio or something? What would be the best course of action for me to reach my destiny?
I think you should do both, because let's be frank about this. I mean, the kind of movie you're going to produce as an MFA student is not going to be the kind of movie that's produced typically commercially for the movie going public writ large, right? So if you make a $10,000 feature film as an MFA student, and then you use that as a calling card to solicit for a job in Hollywood, working for a producer and learning how to get an understanding of the bigger picture, you're metaphorically, you're going to go back to school and learn how to make $1 million movies or multi-million-dollar movies, right? So you're going to take your current, your existing experience, and you're going to multiply that 10 or 100 fold and learn how to take it to the next level. So I think you're probably going to do both of those things, at some point.
I guess. I just hope it doesn't take too long. I'm already almost 30 years old and I haven't started my career yet. So even though there is a lot to learn, and I admit that, and I know my limits and everything. It's just that I'm hoping to get enough out there as planned, because I already got a lot of ideas.
The good thing about the film industry is I think, as long as you don't try to stay a technician your whole life, because that will be a little brutal on your body. But if you go through the stages of development and evolution as a filmmaker in the industry and start, entry level, moving equipment around or working on set and making other people's movies, and gradually work towards a career where you're making more creative decisions and you're part of the planning process and part of the directing process, I think you can be a filmmaker well into your 70s and maybe even your 80s. I mean, there's a number of filmmakers that are still out there kicking around that are, pressing 80, if not already in their 80s, out there working, and they're still successful. They're still productive.
I would love to keep making movies by then. I just don't want to wait that. I just don't want to wait that long to do it, though.
Well, all things in their own time, I think. There might be, if you want to get philosophical about it, there might be a reason why you got into this environment at 30 instead of 20, right? That doesn't mean that you got in at the wrong time. It doesn't mean that you're late or behind in some esoteric schedule that exists out there, okay? It's just that's where you're at right now. Are you learning all the time? Are you getting better all the time? Can you monitor your own progress? Can you chart your evolution? Can you see change in your career experience? Or do you feel like you're flatlining? If you feel like you're flatlining, then you have a problem. But being 30 is not necessarily a problem. It's just when you got into it. I got in at 17. That doesn't mean anything. I got out at 48, right? So if you shift that downstream a little bit to 30, I might have worked until I was 68, and would it have been any different or any more productive? I don't know. So don't worry about chronologically how old you are. I think you can get into this at almost any level. It really depends on your expectations. But I mean, there's people out there. William Shatner's still out there at 80 something years old, and he's still doing
Yeah, he is.
John
Delancey, he's quite up there, and he's still acting.
Yeah, I mean, Steven Spielberg's well into his 70s now, and I mean, you got all of these guys that are out there, and they're still doing it. They contribute proportional to their physical ability and their mental acuity at the age that they're at. So if you're sharp at 80, if you're sharp, you're sharp. And why shouldn't you still be doing what you love and what you enjoy?
Of course.
Just don't be out there loading trucks at 80. That's a little bit of a disaster. But other than that, I think you can be involved as long as you want to be involved, as long as you can stay engaged, right? Which is what that guy in the video was talking about. He's talking about, how do you know you're not a filmmaker? Well, you're not a filmmaker if you can't stay focused on the objective for very long. If you get bored or frustrated very quickly, if you constantly have to resolve feelings of wanting to quit and get out, these might not be good signs, because that might indicate that, your level of commitment isn't that strong, or maybe you're simply not cut out for it, which I think is kind of rare. I think almost anybody can learn this. This isn't brain surgery that we're doing.
Right.
And even if it was, somebody had to learn how to be a brain surgeon. We weren't born with that ability. So, it's all about your level of commitment, your level of engagement. And I talk about this a lot with my students. I may have mentioned it to you guys last week as we kind of started this conversation last week. As long as you feel like at any stage in your career, if you can step away and look objectively at what you've done and what you're doing and feel good about it, like you're not wasting your time, like you're not somehow unhappy with your situation, and that you feel like you still got room to grow, these are all good signs. And you should be introspective with yourself as often as possible and be as honest as you can with yourself as possible, and ask yourself these questions on a regular basis. Because when the answer to these questions starts to become a prevailing no, it might be time for you to think about either retiring or shifting your career to another focus. In some way, reevaluating and looking for that thing that's going to make you happy. If you're creative and your needs are being fed by making films or working on other people's films for that matter, just be honest with yourself. If you're happy, that's a good thing. If you can look back and say, yeah, I did this for 30 years of my life, and now I'm looking at retirement. Am I happy with the time I spent, or do I have regrets? Do I feel like I should have, could have, or would have done something else given the opportunity? I think that's when you've got a problem. But for instance, as broken as my body is, when I look back at the way I spent my life and the career that I had, when people ask me, was there anything about it that you would change? I'm like, no, not particularly. It was all a good trade, because I'm pretty happy with what I was able to do. Did I get to do everything I wanted to do? No, not quite. But I took a pretty big bite out of that list, and I think that's all anybody can say. If you're honest with yourself, is I ticked off as many of the boxes as I could on my bucket list before I had to retire. And I don't regret any of those choices. And then I think you're going to be okay. And I think, they're asking, how do you know you're a filmmaker? How do you know you're not a filmmaker? There were many points in my career when I questioned whether I was actually a filmmaker, because I was only doing lighting, or I was only doing grip, and I wasn't concerned with every aspect of what was going on. And the answer to that question, ultimately, I discovered, was yes, I was a filmmaker the whole time. You can't do it all yourself and do it at that level of $200 million. It's just not possible. It's not even remotely a realistic expectation. Filmmaking is, by all estimations, a collaborative process, for better or worse. And it requires more than an individual if your expectations are very high, and if your level of quality and your objectives are reminiscent of any of the other films out there being made that use, great numbers of people to get that accomplished. So we're talking about tempering attitudes, expectations, managing expectations, and learning how to be confident, and learning how to, pursue your goals in a way that are going to satisfy your objectives, so that you don't regret having spent the time and the effort.
Well, the thing about me is that I'm the exact opposite of that. Whenever I'm filmmaking, whenever I'm writing a script, whenever I'm doing a little bit of storyboard, maybe the little times that I'm filming or acting, it feels so good. It felt so right. It felt like it felt so fun, and it felt like I was actually doing something with my life. It's when I'm not doing all of this is when I start to feel bad. feels like I should be spending more time doing this, and yet I'm doing this. Brain, why aren't you making ideas for this script? It's so fun to make it, and yet you don't want to force these words in there. You got to make sure it makes sense. Got to make sure it's right.
Mhm.
And so basically I just push myself too much that I gotta keep working, feel like I'm actually doing something, that's
That's not the
basically the only
opposite.
thing.
That's not the opposite of what I'm talking about. Don't get me wrong.
It's not.
There was never a point in time when I didn't feel like I belonged where I was, and that if I couldn't be there, I was absolutely going to die. Because that's really I think it's kind of a prerequisite to this process. If after you've been doing it a while and you work enough 15-hour days and you experience the sheer exhaustion of working, a long intensive day on a film set, if you still walk away and say, I would rather have done that today than anything else, and you're in the right headspace. You're absolutely in the right headspace. So if you're not happy, get out of it, but you're going to have days where you're going to feel more exuberant than others. That's just normal. But I'm talking about in aggregate, the whole big picture. If you feel good about it and you can't imagine yourself doing anything else, then I think that's a prerequisite more than anything else. That's a measure of your dedication and your resolve to to succeed at doing this thing for a living. Because doing it for a living is really that's what we're trying to accomplish here, right? You don't want to have to coordinate this with a day job, although some people are very happy and content with that relationship to filmmaking. They have a day job, and then when they make films, they make small, proportionate efforts that reflect, the individual and the creativity of themselves, and not a lot of collaborators. And that I think that could be equally rewarding if that's how you're geared. Some people need to be able to compartmentalize their filmmaking, and I could never do that. I was always all in, all in, eat, sleep, drink, breathe this thing, because there's a lot of competition, and I really, really like the process of filmmaking. I don't know a lot about any other kinds of jobs outside of what was relevant to the career that I had. So I was all in all the time and very happy to be involved and couldn't wait to go to work. You know, even if I knew it was going to be raining outside that day and I had to wear my raincoat, or in Florida there seems to be no relief from the rain. You just do it because you wear a raincoat and you end up soaking wet anyway because you're sweating to death, or you just let the rain drench you and be done with it, but outside of working in the rain, which is one of my picadillos, I don't think there was ever a situation where I was truly unhappy to be there. I can't think of one. Let me show you what I prepared for you on my little slideshow here. So I put together this this deal. I'm gonna put you guys over here. All right, so it's the second week. Are you a filmmaker? So I'm taking the other half of that question, which I think is the same coin, really. How do you know you're not a filmmaker? Well, how do you know that you are, right? If you ask yourself the question, think really hard about it. You're going to be able to answer this in a few personal ways. And then you qualify it with education. So how do you know you're a filmmaker? Well, I pulled some relevant quotes for you. Okay. I like Nietzsche. I've discovered that I have a lot philosophically in common with Friedrich Nietzsche, and I've read a couple of his books now, and I find them to be revelations in and of themselves. But I find that the philosophy is very reminiscent of a lot of things that I've thought about or questions I've asked of myself. And he has a pretty interesting take on artistic expression and the creative process. And he's saying he's talking about the duality of creativity, I guess. And he says that artists have a vested interest in our believing, the general public believing, that in the flash of revelation, the so-called inspiration shining down from the heavens as a ray of grace, that it's somehow an inspiration from outside of the self, and that in reality, the imagination of the good artist or the thinker produces continuously good or mediocre or bad things all at the same time. And it's merely your judgment and your training that sharpen your point of view and allow you to accept or reject concepts or production based on your experience, and that all great artists and thinkers are great workers, indefatigable, meaning they work tirelessly, not only in the process of invention, but also in the rejecting, sifting through, transforming, and ordering of ideas. Right. So that was Nietzsche. He also said a really interesting thing. I pulled this book off my shelf. I read it quite a while ago. It's Kenneth Burke in discussion with Heidegger, with Martin Heidegger, and they talk about Nietzsche. And Heidegger brings up the point that Nietzsche once said that creative people and artists should be the only ones that are ruling the world, which I wholly agree with, by the way. So I really like where Nietzsche's coming from on some of these topics of creativity and artisanship. And it's no surprise that a philosopher would speak, equally highly of the process. The sheer secrecy of creativity, the difficulty in understanding how things happen when it happens to us, means that we have often associated breakthroughs in creativity with an external force. And so he's talking about understanding that, right? And the fact that until the Enlightenment, the imagination was entirely synonymous with God or higher powers, which is part of the reason why there was so many effigies of God and topics and scenes from holy documents in the classical period, particularly in paintings. So the higher power was being credited with all of our creative expression. Being creative meant channeling the muse, giving voice to the ingenious gods. Inspiration, after all, literally meant breathed upon by God, right? Because people couldn't understand creativity, they assumed that their best ideas came from somewhere else and that the imagination was outsourced. Okay, we know that not to be the case. So we've come a long way in our understanding of creativity. And it becomes, I think, a way of life that we accept, and I think it's at the root of our humanity to begin with. We seem to be the only animals that create effigy, that we create images and iconography out of reverence, right? Which is something that other animals in the animal kingdom simply don't do. So the creative self, knowing the creative self, I think is a very important part of the process. As quickly as you can identify with your motivation and your level of understanding, and then manage your expectations, temper your expectations on your own capability. I think that the sooner you're going to see success in your effort. Here's Henry Matisse. I don't know if you guys know who Matisse is. Pretty famous painter, expressionist. Creative people are curious, flexible, persistent, independent, with a tremendous spirit of adventure and a love of play. And I think, that's a very true statement. In fact, they embrace this this philosophy in places like Google and well, not Amazon, but Google, Imagine Entertainment. I was never so impressed with a production studio as I was when I went to Imagine to do a project. And the cafeteria at the Imagine headquarters in Los Angeles, everything was free. You didn't have to pay for your lunch. There was giant games, video games, and things like ball crawl and all kinds of stuff on the premises at all times. So either as a creative, you could go in, you could let off some steam, or maybe if your family was coming in to visit because you're working long hours, there were things for kids to do. There were activities, there was stuff. The environment was conducive to healthy, positive, creative collaboration. So I think this is a very true statement by Henry Matisse, very revealing. And Albert Einstein, of all people, information is not knowledge. The only source of knowledge is experience, Albert Einstein. So he's talking about, you know, you can sit around and talk about dead Russian filmmakers, or you can go out there and you can make your own films, or you can work on films with other people, and you can know the process more intimately, right? So if you're talking about Tarkovsky and you're talking about his you know, his thesis on, you know, camera movement, why not just get out there and be a dolly grip and know firsthand the exhilaration of pushing a dolly in a shot and actuating camera movement that's relying on your eyes, your reflexes, your physical capability, and your sense of timing happening in real time as the camera's recording something. You're moving that camera down a rail or along you know, a set of dolly boards or on a dance floor. Okay. Being in those moments as a dolly grip were some of the most visceral moments that I've ever had in my filmmaking career. You know, it's focus pulling was another one, because the very thing that you are engaged in that moment is reflected on the screen at some point eventually, right? Whether it's the image in a focus or out of focus at the right moment, whether the camera makes it to the number 2 in time for the actor to deliver their line perfectly on their mark, or whether you're a little ahead or a little bit behind, you know, all of those moments, you are so directly connected to that project, that film. And it's, that effort ends up on the screen, unlike much of the other effort that goes unrecognized on the screen, other than we sort of understand it secondhand, like lighting and exposure and so forth. You know, the fact that we've done those things well contributes to the overall audience experience being favorable. But in a moment, when you're talking about the image being out of focus or in focus, that's one person in one moment in time being engaged with that thing that's happening. And it's as close to the action as you can get. Dolly grip is one of those things. Focus puller is one of those things. And these are really, really important moments, and they can be as informative and probably more informative than any reading you can do in a book, because it will translate through the hand. Okay. One of my favorite books, I should have pulled it off my shelf, but it's called Craftsmanship. And I have a quote here from Heidegger, as a matter of fact, coming out of Being in Time. And Heidegger, Martin Heidegger is talking specifically about the relationship of the creative individual, the artist, and the manifestation of creativity through the hands. And the idea that he calls it the ready to hand moment of creativity. He's talking about how technology fades from view in the creative hand as the user focuses on the immediate performance of the tool in quotation marks, a euphemism for reason or resources at the ready, right? A condition such that in his book, he talks about, he uses the phrase ready at hand. Your experience is ready, your judgment is ready, your creative impulse is ready at hand, you're ready to execute, and you do it through manipulation, through your hands. Meaning that the tool, whatever that tool is that you're using, through the experience of the user, becomes metaphorically linked to the body through the hands. Okay, it's the association of creativity with the hands. Working with your hands should then not have any kind of negative connotation at all, because the hands become the permutator of your creative expression, the means of your creative expression. Okay. And the idea gives credence to expressions like offhand, or I knew something like the back of my hand. I know it like I know my own hand. And it's really talking about your creativity being second nature and a product of working with your hands, right? And I really believe that. So if you're a carpenter, for instance, you know, what you can do with a hammer and chisel might be akin to a miracle compared to some people who don't have the same mechanical capability. If you're a painter, what you can do with a brush stroke and a canvas, you know, and so also as filmmakers, what we can do with lights and cameras, what we can do with pen and paper, writing a script that resonates from a textual document to a performative document and elicits emotion and response from an audience. I mean, these are all wonderful creative moments. And I associate all of that with handmade craftsmanship. In other words, the repetition of learned trade skills, the adaptation of tools and implements that aid in the creativity, the reproduction of predictable moments that can be refined over time and repeated and relied upon. All of these things I think are extremely, extremely important. Film courage, we've been talking about that all along. This is the guy that's talking about how you're not a filmmaker if you don't have the endurance for it, if you don't have the patience for it. What I think is funny is Spike Lee is doing one of those sort of online teaching programs right now. And he has this line where he talks about, in no uncertain terms do I ever recommend that anybody must go to film school, right? He's saying it's an elective process. And I agree with him. I absolutely agree with him. You don't have to go to film school. Film school is great for networking, making friends, learning how to function with groups, being able to collaborate, share ideas, work with people that help one another through the experience of learning how films are made. And then you're free to make errors as often as you need to in order to get to intimately understand your craft, whatever that craft is, writing or camera work or whatever. So he's a great one who has a master's of fine art education himself, but will tell you, as will I, that no, you don't need to go to film school. You elect to go to film school. And then, of course, we've been talking about this kind of all along. So ask yourself, whose advice about choosing a film school resonated with you? Is there any advice you'd give to other people? What benefits of film school do you agree with from the article? What don't you agree with, for instance, in the article? Think about how you would answer some of these questions if they were put to you. That's kind of what your discussion post is about, if you haven't done it already. And I would think about the word tradecraft, right? So, just like, a cabinet maker making, a fine piece of furniture, working with your hands, being inspired and taking material, working in a medium, taking material, raw material, and transforming it into an idea, from a pile of raw materials into an idea, whether it's a very ornate piece of furniture or a film or a painting or a song, and learn how to reflect. How are you doing your work? Why are you doing your work? How can you get better at it? How can you move towards a more professional way of working with yourself, with other people? What does your idea of a career look like? Ask yourself these questions. What steps, big or small, can you do today or next week or next month that will get you a little bit closer to your ideal goal? Take stock in your daily and weekly activities. What do you do every day or every week that gets you closer to your objective? How can you modify that? How can you do better? What hasn't worked? What does work? What obstacles do you create for yourself? Do you have any inadvertent programming? Are you somehow convinced that you'll never be successful? Do you need to overcome certain kind of intellectual hindrances like that, for instance? Are you somehow uncomfortable or anxious about something in your personal life that you can correct, maybe to relieve some of that tension? Make a plan, make an action plan, and repeat this process as often as possible to gauge your progress. So I just had a couple of things I thought I might read for you. things that I wrote and that maybe you can reflect on as well. The first is my take on film school. So it's kind of running concurrent with what Spike is talking about. But I thought I would just read it to you and give you a sense of how I feel about it. So let's talk about film school. In a web-based commercial for masterclass.com, Spike Lee was quoted as saying, "In no way, shape, or form will I ever tell you that you have to go to film school." He is very matter of fact in his assertion. He bases it on his own experience breaking into the industry as a young Black filmmaker in New York City. He makes his claim despite having been awarded a BA from Morehouse College and an MFA from New York University. I'm inclined to agree with him on his position. You do not need a film school degree to work in Hollywood. By that, I mean the film business at large. It has traditionally been a labor-related endeavor, established well over 100 years ago on both the East and West coasts of America. Although many credit Los Angeles as the epicenter, certainly New York and Chicago have done their turn at the top of the production hierarchy, and more recently, Atlanta has joined the conversation. In the interest of disclosure, I should mention that this year marks my 10th year as a teacher. At this point, it's my 11th year. So if a college education is not required to gain employment in the movie industry, then why bother with the time and the expense? This is a good question, one that's been put to me many times by some of my more conflicted students. Film school, like any other advanced degree, is directly proportional to the effort that you put into it. While it's possible to skate by doing the bare minimum necessary to graduate or spend the minimal amounts of time and resources in order to access education, the shortcomings of that type of investment will become very quickly apparent to you when you enter the field, and you will appear lacking. Conversely, you can experience diminishing returns on overinvestment in a film school education. The key is balance between the economics and the minimum skills required for entry into the business. Notice I'm citing skill sets and not theory. Filmmaking is an industrial manufacturing process requiring skilled labor. For all practical purposes, the theoreticians are relegated to academia and exist at the periphery of the industry. Germane to this discussion, I'll use my own career path as an example. I'm a veteran of over 75 feature films and over 400 episodes of television. My career spans 30 years, and I continue to remain engaged with the industry to this day in a variety of capacities. These articles and podcasts that I'm doing are but two prime examples of the material I can create for individuals, both active and aspiring to be involved in filmmaking. However, mine is the exception, not the rule. Upon my retirement from physical production, I returned to college to complete my BA after all in writing and rhetoric. Subsequently, I have also earned an MFA in creative writing. In noting that neither of my degrees are related to my technical specialization, rather, both accolades were earned with the intention of raising my equity, not only as a filmmaker, but as a college professor. The point of film school, or any advanced degree for that matter, resides in the creation of relationships that will continue outside of film school. It's intended to serve as the nurturing time required to bring a layman up to speed on the latest technology, methodology, or conventional wisdom relevant to a particular profession. It's the calm before the storm, a jumping off point, if you will, a time to reflect, decide, and then commit to the preparation necessary to enter your chosen field, all while under the watchful eye of qualified teachers and guidance counselors. Let's talk about the term qualified for a moment. In the film guilds across America, the term qualified is used to describe someone with the knowledge and the experience necessary to perform a function or a job. This distinction is determined by the trade unions or other authorities having jurisdiction, and at no time should it be confused with terms like efficient or competent. Functional knowledge is the synthesis of practical training coupled with experience over time. It's a kind of formula. However, knowledge is not solely gained from reading a book, taking a test, or having permission or having been employed to perform a particular job, although each of these are included under the auspices of qualification. All these components must be gathered, practiced, and perfected over time until mastery is achieved. Only then can someone truly be designated as qualified. Authority is another matter, and it's often granted or awarded to individuals or organizations who demonstrate knowledge in a particular field, paired with stewardship and mentorship. It's a combination of all three principles that guarantee integrity and ensure a favorable outcome in a given situation. Knowledge and experience guide the hands. Stewardship ensures that the governing principles, best practices, and conditions of quality and value are maintained. And mentorship ensures that each successive generation of practitioners is the same consistent quality and dedicated as the one preceding it, and that the sacred knowledge is passed on. These are the laws that govern the jungles of the industry residing outside the safe confines of academia. So can these goals be met in school? Perhaps. Can one expect reasonable success even if college is bypassed in lieu of entering a career field right away? Yes. Am I proof? Yes. Does it mean that this prescription is applicable to everyone? No. Everyone's different. Each of us knows his or her own limitations, our talents, our fears, and our desires better than anyone. It's required of each of us to be introspective regarding these concerns, relying on self-honesty and sincerity when considering the question of foregoing film school. And then there's the question of cost. How much is this grooming worth? The question of added value for an education in film is a subject for debate. It is by no means a guarantee of admission into the world of film production. It can be viewed as an earnest precursor to one's overall commitment. This critical investment comes in the form of tuition, study time, commitment to excellence in the performance of certifiable tasks, the subscription to a process of reliability and betterment using skills honed over a lifetime. Film school can be a catalyst for this kind of growth. Under the proper tutelage of film student education can set these wheels in motion. Likewise, an inferior education can lead to unwarranted expense. Thus, the onus lies with the individual to validate, verify your prospective choices. The key here is to research the institution you're interested in attending. Do they have bona fides with measurable value? Do the alumni speak highly of the institution, or do they express resentment or regret? These are products of an inferior education. If these conditions are present in a cursory investigation of a college or a university, one should avoid it. You must always investigate your choices and remain vigilant against the scammers. There are a variety of top-notch universities that provide solid filmmaking education. On the other hand, there are a growing number of mediocre candidates who are all vying for your tuition dollars. Caveat emptor, may the buyer beware. If, on the other hand, you find faculty who are present, a good cross-section of the industry that you hope to join with verifiable qualifications and experience and a willingness to share, then proceed with cautious optimism. Ask all the questions to your satisfaction. Then, if you still get a feeling that suggests you can grow and mature within the structure of that institution or that program, don't fear the commitment. Don't hesitate. The experience will ultimately be beneficial in aiding your transition to the professional world. The film business is over a century old. The world's thirst for content is accelerating, not decreasing, and the demand for your services upon graduation will be virulent. The industry will be waiting for you when you've earned your degree and you're ready to come. Don't allow yourself to be pressured. However, if your time is of the essence and you feel ready sooner than later, there may be no time like the present. If this is the case, make that decision under the full wit and wisdom of sincerity. Be keen to understand that you may eventually find yourself back in school regardless. A film career comes with no guarantees in terms of duration or financial success. Therefore, approach with confidence and enjoy the ride. So that was my answer to the question, should I go to film school? Okay. So in all of its ambiguity, I guess I'm saying, anything is worth doing if you're willing to do it well, if you're willing to give it your all, 100%. Have faith in the process, have a little trust, choose well, and then commit. Commit is the most important part of this whole thing. If you're not willing to commit, if you don't have the stamina to stick with your decisions, right? If you don't have the integrity or the wherewithal to see something through, finish what you started, then this might not be the process for you. This might not be the career for you. Okay. So be honest with yourself when you ask yourself these same questions. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you feel like I'm full of stuff, or am I resonating with you at some level?
Oh, you're full of stuff, all right. You're full of the best stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
makes me realize. I thought about what you said when you said maybe things are just meant to be. Like I'm starting in this age, and you know what? I think having you as a professor had something to do with it. You know, I'm learning a lot from you.
I'm 55, right? So what do I know? Well, some stuff, and I hope it's of value to you. I hope it'll help you. And then, get in it when your heart feels right, when you're ready to commit to it, because that's what it really needs. It needs your full commitment and engagement. There's too many folks who are looking to be a part of this thing. And they're good. Some of them are very good at what they do. Some of them, it seems like they're rolling out of bed. They know what needs to be done and they're good at it. Right. And you're going to be out there with those folks. And then you're going to be out there with some folks that aren't as committed as you are. Right. It's kind of like professional golf, all these guys are out there playing golf and they're all competing, but there's no teams. It's all an individual effort, right? If Tiger Woods wins, it's because Tiger put in the time. He practiced and he was healthy at the time of the competition, and he was having a good day. His mind wasn't plagued with burdens of anxiety or problems off the golf course, and it's a combination of a lot of things that have to be sort of firing on all 8 cylinders at the right place and the right time for performance to match expectation. And it's a good process. And, if you don't get it right, if you don't win the golf tournament this week, maybe you're the runner up, maybe next week it'll be your week to win it all. You just have to stick with it and have faith in the process and give yourself the best education you can, the best advantages you can. Having said that, then I would give you this last bit of advice, and this was my graduation address. I finished salutatorian, second in my class in my MFA in screenwriting, and so my address to my classmates was called a word for the plebes, and it states that you are not the first, and you will not be the last to pass this way. That was the essence of the inscription Kilroy was here when scribbled across the landscape in the US and Europe as early as the 1930s. Ask your dad, or better yet, your grandfather, about Kilroy. It was more than a pop reference to a cartoon, but it was a symbolic empathy. Hope in the form of breadcrumbs, read graffiti, for men to cling to in times of war. You are a wino. Writer in name only. That was my craft that I studied for, but you could replace that with filmmaker at this point. You may also be a wino of the libacious kind, having been driven to drink by the pressures of grad school. In either case, it's important to know that this is only the beginning. Your degree, read degree, or whatever the case, graduate or undergraduate, is in preparation for the real work that must come now. Up until now, you've had the benefit and the security of classmates with their solicitous praise, teachers with their constructive feedback, and assignments with deadlines that guide your learning experience, give you a sense of accountability, and provide your mind with structure. Once outside the confines of your university, there will be no more structure, save that which you provide for yourself. There'll be nobody to point the way unless you seek new mentors and create new relationships with which to rely out in the real world in quotes. Now, with your shiny new degree, you must roll up your sleeves and begin the real work of designing and implementing your writing career, film career, whatever the case may be. College was just the first step. It was preparation. The value of your preparations will be tested when paired with your ambition. Remember, work defines creativity, not intention. The best intentions aren't worth anything if you're not willing to put those intentions into action. In the 14th and 15th centuries, when cartographers had no information to include at the edges of their maritime maps of the world, they would simply write, "Beyond here, there be dragons." It was a way to defer the faint of heart or the irresolute. It was also a way to warn people. The details of the known world have been painstakingly achieved by the bravery and the heroic actions of those who have gone before you. Each time, pushing the boundaries of the known world a little bit further towards the horizon. This is your time. Do your due diligence. Do your work. Be a contributor. We have a saying in Hollywood: lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. But access requires more than that. Do whatever it takes. Don't cut corners. Those who know better will see through half-hearted work. Prepare completely so you can take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way. Be ready to spring into action when the clarion calls. Give 110%. Take solace in the work that's well done. The most successful people in Hollywood are the ones who can look back on a body of work with a feeling of accomplishment and not regret. Above all else, be honest in your effort. Be impeccable in your craft. Don't make excuses, just do it or don't. And never discount a little luck. With a bit of your own, you will taste success. In short, I'll sum up my thoughts using maritime iconography. Be watchful of following seas. Balance your sails. Plot your course. Use the stars. Heave to and feel the wind on your face. And be ever mindful, for I have seen the dragons, and they are real. So that was my graduation address. And those are my feelings about the experience. Do what you have to do. Be honest and commit. Dedicate yourself. And you can't help but feel proud at the end of 10 years, 20 years, whatever that time will be. And we really don't know, right? This could be a 5-year experience. You're in, out, and done. Or it could last, the rest of your life. Whatever it is, have fun and enjoy it. So having said that, and I'll remind you again of some of your critical dates. We've passed a few of the most recent now. Your ad drop deadlines, your FAFSA. Let's see, you've got a discussion post coming up, and we're going to have a midterm in a couple of weeks. Nothing too big, nothing serious. But next week I have for you an editor, Ashton Bracciadetta. Is going to talk to you about some interesting stuff, cutting reels and things. If you're editors, about cutting a reel. If you're a cameraman, cutting a reel, director or actor. After that, I'm lining up Janelle Jordan from Production Hub. So that's in the next couple of weeks coming up. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And then I got a really infectious guy. You want to talk about branding and inspiration. The week after that, week 5, I think it is. I've got Janelle coming in from Production Hub to talk to you guys about networking outside of school, getting your name out there as whatever discipline you're involved in. If you're an editor, there's ways of offering yourself to the community, offering your services as an editor, camera person, lighting and grip person. So I think that's going to be a good conversation for you, helpful to a lot of you. I want to open it up to questions if there are any, and if not, I think it would be nice to let you guys out early for a change. What do you think? Any feedback, any questions, anything I can help you with on or off topic from this afternoon?
I really liked your speech there. I thought it was very, very good.
Thanks. It's supposed to give you a little bit of a boot in the butt, get you going, get you jazzed up and happy about what you're doing. You're a senior, and I don't know, when I was a senior, it seemed like it was a lot of mixed emotions. It was, relief that I'd finally done the thing that I'd waited so many years to finish. And then it was a little bit of inhibition in a way. It's like, I really kind of going back to school. I enjoyed my academic experience. I was happy to be back in the position of the learner for a change, and hear new ideas and come up to speed on current technology and paradigms and so forth. So it was a mixed bag of emotions, and I've had my career, so I can say, you know, academia might be where I belong now, but it's not where you guys belong when you're finally ready to pull the ripcord and do your thing. You got to get out there and you got to get tested. And I don't mean COVID. You got to test yourself, your resolve. You got to test your skill and what you've learned, put it all in action and see how you do. And don't leave any stone or question unresolved, you know, go out and test it all. That's why I ended up in LA at the end of my career. You know, there's no bigger mountain than that one. If you're a mountaineer, you know, you got to see if you can climb it and get as close to the top as you can before you have to turn around and head back, you know. And then you'll never wonder what that experience would have been like if you had ever taken the risk. Just do it. You know, you can always come back and talk about it later, like me, right? But if you don't have any stories to tell, who's going to stick around and you know, and listen? Think about what you want to do, and let's help you put that in motion. We're going to help you implement your plan. Okay. If you don't have any questions for me now, you can always reach out to me, you know, through the email, or, you know, we can do a Zoom session or something if you want to talk in private. Okay. All right, guys. I think we lost a couple of people. I put a couple of folks to sleep. That's par for the course. All right. But I'm going to let you go early today. Have a good afternoon.
You
Make sure you
too.
get your homework done.
Will do.
See you all next week.
Have a good day.
All
Thank you,
right.
Professor.
Thank you.